Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, my handsome friend. Good morning. I'm Anthony, and this is Backchannel. And I've been sitting here for a while, and I don't know where you've been, but it's been my absolute pleasure to sit here and wait for you. So, here we are, you and I hanging out just for a little bit of a moment, spending a bit of time together, and chewing the fat, as it were. So the show this morning is going to be the same as yesterday, only better, because every day I like to think it gets a little bit better, just by like 0.5%. That's what we do. So if you are, sticking around for it, then welcome. Spend your time with us here. Lots to talk about, of course, this morning. We're going to look at Russia and Ukraine. We're going to look at Joe Biden It's been quite funny, actually. Some news on Omicron this morning. They reckon that 3 shots of Pfizer will deal with Omicron quite nicely. That's good news. My daughter's getting Pfizer today. She's not happy about it. What else? I mean, they'll say the same for Moderna, but they just haven't done the testing yet on Moderna. But they will probably say the same. I think what they're basically saying is anything that's an mRNA vaccine is going to be fine, because it's the technology is so clever. Now, of course, the right-wing brigades, the Republicans, will be like, that's because it's gene therapy. That's their argument. It's because it's gene therapy. And let me be the first to tell you that an mRNA vaccine goes nowhere near your genetics. That's not what it does. If you know anything about it, if you've read anything, if you've bothered to read about the science, your genetics are not restructured. Your DNA isn't rebuilt because of an mRNA vaccine. It's just a different technology to a traditional, J&J type vaccine. And AstraZeneca, which is not even approved in the US, but that's also a different technology as well. It's more of a traditional vaccine, but again, it's just different, different. So anyway, we're going to, whiz around the newspapers, look at that kind of stuff. If you want to get in touch, then you can do that in the usual way. All you have to do is go to backchannel.tv. You can message me there, or you can talk to your Echo device. Just say the wake-up word followed by say, followed by your message. You know all this stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, the comments section is there for you to comment on. That's why it's called the comments section. And we're going to dive straight into the newspapers with the New York Times. I'm actually kind of excited about the New York Times for lots of reasons, because I was thrilled to see the Christmas tree outside the Fox News station go up in flames yesterday. Did you see this? They reckon it was a homeless person with a lighter set fire to this giant Christmas tree outside the Fox News headquarters. They call it Fox Square. Hi, Bob. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. They obviously put it out, but it's just really very much a symbol of our times, isn't it? That the Fox News Christmas tree going up in flames in Fox Square. It's just the sign of our times. That's how it is now. Headline on the front of the New York Times this morning: stimulus had greatest effect on poorer households. That's interesting, isn't it? Yes, is there any more about that, or is it just a headline? Oh, here we go. Cash cushions for Americans starts to shrink. It says infusions of government cash that warded off an economic calamity have left millions of households with bigger bank balances than before the pandemic. Savings that have driven a torrent of consumer spending help pay off debts and at times reduce the urgency of job hunts. But many low-income Americans find their savings dwindling or even depleted, and for them, the economic recovery is looking less buoyant. Yes, over the past 18 months or so, experts have been closely tracking the multi-trillion-dollar increase in what economists call excess savings, which generally defined as the amount by which people's cash reserves during the COVID-19 crisis exceeded what they would normally have saved. It's very interesting, this, isn't it? I mean, I do get the feeling that we are going to see even more of a bounce, because if people have been saving this money and not spending it, because, the thing is, if you're not going out, then you can't spend it, can you? If you're not going out, it's like it's not possible to spend it. So I feel like, I really feel like we are going to see a bounce in the economy. I mean, we already have, unemployment in the US was at its lowest in nearly 50 years. So I get the feeling that we're going to be fine economically, but I do not think we're going to be fine pandemically, because I do think that Omicron is going to be a problem, and I do think people are over it, and I do think that this kind of lazy attitude towards the pandemic is kicking in. And what is it with people? I mean, I would literally wear a mask for the rest of my life if it helped society. For me, there's no end date. I don't think, I need to, when the hell is this going to be over? I am prepared to be inconvenienced for the good of the common man or woman or non-binary. But isn't this the problem? Isn't this the world now? That there are some people who have decided, upon their infinite wisdom, that that's not enough for them. That they need to be, that they just need to be the ones to set the rules, and they won't live by government rules. And that's a problem in England at the moment, because a tape has leaked of some Boris Johnson employees laughing and joking about having a Christmas party in number 10 Downing Street. And of course it completely implicates him, and a survey this morning suggested that 56% of Britons would like the Prime Minister to resign. And he's not going to. In fact, today is the House of Commons debate. They call it Prime Minister's Questions, and he got up and apologised for nearly 2 minutes. But it's all just bluster. Bluster is such a great word to describe Boris Johnson. And it really is. It should be his middle name instead of Defeffel. It should be Bluster. Boris Bluster Johnson. That's basically, that's the British Prime Minister for you. Wonderful. What a joy. Deep joy. So, what we were saying, we were just basically talking about this kind of, a changed world. And we'll talk more about this a little bit later. But, I do feel that we're increasingly going to see people who just will not want to play by government rules. And my concern with that is there'll come a point where they won't want to pay tax either. Well, invariably, most Republicans don't pay tax. That's the irony of all of this, that they take advantage of so many tax avoidance schemes that whenever I've hung out with Conservatives, all they want to talk about is how to save tax. They just don't want to pay tax. Invariably, they don't pay tax. So Democrats end up paying their taxes because they care about this kind of social construct of roads and fire service and things that need to be paid for collectively. And then Republicans just try and shrink government, don't pay tax, are not interested in that kind of, socialist platform. Because all modern democracies are socialist platforms, aren't they? You pay your taxes and that pays for public services. I mean, that is a socialist structure. And I don't know why in America people don't really question why Republicans don't want to play by those rules. So not wearing a mask is the same as not wanting to contribute to public services. It's the same ethos. It's exactly the same thing. It's just in a different way. And so mask wearing and not vaccinating and all of these things are extensions of that. It's this attitude of it's a libertarianism really, isn't it? I mean, it's this desire to not be led. And yet, the Republican Party is more cultish with their Trump leader than anybody else. I mean, no one has Biden flags and goes and does Biden rallies in the same way that they do Trump rallies. So how is it that there's this kind of attitude towards the supreme leader? Is it that the supreme leader doesn't pay tax? Is that why we like him? Is it that the supreme leader doesn't play by the rules and that's why we like him? Is it that the supreme leader, is being investigated for multiple sexual misconduct incidences? Is that why we like him? Is it because there's something about him that is illegitimate, unconventional? So to me, there's this misrepresentation behind, not wanting to be led and not wanting to be part of society, this kind of conservative, modern, not traditional conservative, fiscal conservative attitude. This is a modern conservatism. It's more radical, it's more extremist, not wanting to be led, or be part of any kind of societal movement. And yet, this adoration for the supreme leader and this desire to win at whatever cost, but yet still not wanting to pay tax. And it just occurred to me that actually, Donald Trump not giving access to his tax returns ever, which is a requirement of being the president, it's a kind of voluntary requirement, is probably playing to his base. It's basically saying, you can't see my tax returns, you can't see my bank statements, you can't see anything because, who are you? And I think it's the same with people that vote for him. They also don't want to show their tax returns because invariably they haven't paid hardly any tax. I do like it when this stuff occurs to me during the show. I do like it. James has joined us. Good morning. Stacy is having chicken strips with corn and macaroni and cheese. Sorry, it's breakfast time here on the West Coast. It's breakfast time. I love mac and cheese too. I make the most disgusting mac and cheese vegan recipe. You would love it. I might even explain to you how I make it, and then you're going to be like, what? There's no cheese in it. There's no cheese in it. I use a butternut squash, cashew nuts, nutritional yeast, some vegetable stock, garlic, and you blend all of that together and it gives you a creamy yellow sauce. Thick, creamy yellow sauce. And all it is a butternut squash, nutritional yeast, garlic, and what did I miss out? I said there were 4 things earlier. Cashew nut. The cashew nuts is what makes it creamy. The cashew nuts makes it, because cashew nuts are used to make cheese, in fake cheese world all the time. It is good. And then you just mix that with the macaroni, and it's like a creamy, cheesy, and there's no fat, there's no animal product, there's nothing. I mean, it's just macaroni cheese with no cheese. You should try it. It's just a vegan mac and cheese recipe. And then, the thing is, cheese is really bad for you. No one ever said cheese was good for you. No one ever said, oh, you're not very well. Have a bit of cheese. It gives you nightmares and it gives you a heart attack. So it's not necessary. But I did make it for somebody recently and they thought it was the most disgusting thing they'd ever tried. And that's because I used garlic powder instead of fresh garlic. And I've never used garlic powder before. And I didn't know what the quantity you were supposed to use. I thought the equivalent of 3 cloves. It was disgusting. Anyway, not your problem. You can put breadcrumbs on the top as well if you want. You could even put vegan cheese on the top and brown it, and make a crispy top to it. I mean, there's lots you can do. I have a vegan recipe alternative for anything and everything that you like. Anything that you like that is a favorite. I make a vegan lasagna that is so completely, compellingly delicious. It's unctuous. It's unctuous. And yet, you wouldn't know it was vegan. It's my skill. It's just my skill. Okay, back to the New York Times. Sorry for the digression, but, Stacey did bring up a whole main course of snacks. On the banks of the Congo River, 5-star emporium of ambition. This is an article out of Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo. The lobby of the Fleuve Congo Hotel was a swirl of double-breasted suits and tailored dresses one April morning. Shiny gold watches dangled from wrists. Stilettos clacked across marble floors. Smooth jazz played as men in designer loafers sipped espressos. I do love that kind of African loafer that African men love to wear. Do you know what I mean? It's like a loafer. You wouldn't normally wear it with a suit, but they do. And sometimes it has 2 tassels, but invariably it has a gold buckle on the front of it. You know the one I'm talking about? And sometimes it has a fake crocodile skin. The African loafer. Such a great shoe. Would look terrible on me, but on them looks fantastic. with a pinstripe suit. Situated on the banks of the muddy, furious Congo River, the Fleuve is an emporium of ambition. A nation, despite extreme poverty and chronic corruption, serves up raw materials crucial to the planet's battle against climate change. Hi, Tegan. In Washington, thank you for joining us, Tegan. Nice to know you're there. It says the soil in the Democratic Republic of Congo is bursting with cobalt and other metals used in the production of electric car batteries, wind turbines, and other mainstays of the green energy revolution. Practically everyone who passes through the hotel where the air conditioning battles the sweltering heat seems determined to grab a piece of the wealth. Just off the lobby that day, near a sumptuous brunch buffet, sat a 7'2" tall former NBA All-Star player. And he's teamed up in his quest for mineral riches with Gentry Beach, a Texas hedge fund manager who is a family friend and major fundraiser to former President Donald J. Trump. You see, where there's trouble, there's Trump. It's true. Just follow the money. Just follow the money. Mr. Mutombo shared his table with a top Congolese mining lawyer turned politician whose office is conveniently located in a complex near the hotel. Mr. Mutombo is among a wave of adventurers and opportunists who filled a vacuum created by the departure of major American mining companies and by the reluctance of other traditional Western firms to do business in a country with a reputation for labor abuses and bribery. I mean, this is very interesting, isn't it? Because what we're talking about here is something we've mentioned before, the cobalt mining for electric car batteries. It's something that it's going to become one of the kind of activist stories of this show, driven mainly by the producer and voiced by me. Yeah, we should definitely look at this, the concept of investing ethically. I mean, I have a handful of shares, in little things that I've bought, and I won't buy oil or anything that is like fossil fuel. But I have invested in renewables, and I have invested in... I mean, something I think is going to be huge is biofuel for airlines, That's where I think it's going to go, like putting a vegetable oil byproduct into aircraft engines. It's got to happen. Ethical dog food. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm not a doggy person. Don't take that the wrong way, but I really am not a doggy person. And it's hard living in Los Angeles because everybody here seems to have a dog. And they just assume that you're going to love their dog as much as you love them. And I really like to kind of invest my time in my relationship with humans. I really do put dogs in a different category. Now, maybe that's just me being prejudiced. And I'm a firm believer in equality. But for me, the animal kingdom, I have great respect for. Human race, I have great respect for. But when you take animals out of the animal kingdom and you put them in with the human race, like living in their homes, doesn't do it for me. I think animals should be in the wild, and I don't think dogs should be multi-flavored and bred specifically for companionship. I just don't. That's just my view, but I wouldn't stop you from having a dog. Do what you like, just don't make it come and sniff my knees. I think it's fine if it's a dog for the blind, or if it's like a therapy dog. I don't have a problem with that from like a medicinal perspective. And I also think that for elderly people living alone to have a dog is but a dog is a socialized animal now. You see, cats are actually wild animals. Did you know that? Like, even if you have a cat in your home that lives with you, that doesn't pay rent but lives with you, that's still considered a wild animal. Did you know that? Legally, it is. And do you know how I found this out? because I accidentally ran over a cat once. It belonged to the church, and it ran out in the road as I was driving, literally ran under my car as I was driving past the church. And so I went on the internet to look up, whether I needed to report it to the police. And it said, all cats are wild animals. There is no need to report the death of a wild animal. Isn't that interesting? That's the truth. So I looked up how much it costs to buy a similar cat to the one that ended up under the wheels of my smart car. And I donated the very same amount to a cat charity to right the wrong of this incident. Please don't think badly of me. I mean, it wasn't my fault. I was just driving by. I genuinely, I didn't look for a cat to kill. I've had cats. I'm a cat guy. I'm just not a dog guy. Anyway, cats, it turns out, are wild animals. Even ones that are bred in litters and shared amongst friends and family, they're still considered wild animals. They're not considered socialized home, they're just not like dogs. It's just a different category of animal. And that's why I think I prefer cats, because they are wild animals. I just think animals should remain in the wild and humans should remain in carceration, incognito, incontinent. In drive to vaccinate children, doctors uncover pandemic's toll, also on the front of the New York Times this morning. This story is from Charlotte, North Carolina. It says, near the end of one of the first days that 5 to 11-year-olds could get a coronavirus shot last month, Dr. Ann Steptoe, a pediatrician, sat hunched in her cramped office between packages of diapers, onesies, and children's books, cataloguing the week's patients on her laptop. One teenage girl had been sleepless and suicidal. Another was anemic. Several young boys had gained weight during the pandemic. A 10-year-old had been plagued by asthma attacks and was using her inhalers incorrectly. Another child of the same age needed a mental health consultation after angry outbursts at school. The rollout of the shot for young children brought relief for many families eager to shore up protections amid a wave of new virus cases. But much of the upfront demand has already been met. Many parents who were eager to get their children vaccinated have done so. The success of the campaign, made even more urgent with the arrival of the Omicron variant, depends on the next phase, reaching the hesitant and undecided, including those who've not given thought or gained access to the shot. There it is. So, and then there's just one final story on the front of the New York Times. US warns Putin of costs for any Ukraine invasion. They had a 2-hour virtual summit. They were basically on Zoom for 2 hours. It was just like me and my mum just having a chat. Same old, same old. Just 2 hours of talking about anything. We're going to talk about the redrawing of maps in California. This is a very big story that we touched on yesterday, and it's definitely something that needs to be mentioned, so we'll look at that. There's a story out of Fresno, and it says, for nearly 3 years, Phil Arballo has been running for Congress against Representative Devin Nunes, the Republican that Democrats across the country have loved to loathe, raising money by the truckload and compiling an email outreach list that is all the more impressive considering his lack of professional political experience. On Monday, Mr. Nunes announced he would resign from Congress at the year's end to lead former President Trump's media and technology company, continuing an unswerving fealty to Mr. Trump that had turned him into a national figure of admiration on the right and contempt on the left. So, we're going to look at this in more detail because there's actually quite a lot to talk about. We're going to be looking at Yes, that's right. As reported on the front page of today's New York Times, we'll look at the redrawn maps of California, the once-a-decade redistricting. It's going to mean big changes for party politics, including this from, Devin Nunes leaving California. It's going to leave a space, isn't it, for a Democratic candidate there. So we'll talk about redistricting, what it is, why we do it, why it matters, who's in charge, and what about the diversity, what is gerrymandering. We'll talk about this and answering all of those questions more. Also, it's not looking good for Democrats because They're losing more public confidence. We'll take a look at the results from the Wall Street Journal poll. And finally, on this day in American history, we'll have a look at the consequences, both good and bad, of Dwight D. Eisenhower's Atoms of Peace speech delivered on December the 8th, 1953. On this very day. So that's all to come. Let's jump on the Wall Street Journal now, because that's next on our list of newspapers. Stacey wants the San Antonio Express. Don't worry, we'll do that in just a moment. She also says, Anthony, I agree with you. A dog should be in the animal kingdom, not the human kingdom. There you go, you see. I'm telling you, it's like, I just think that the human impact on this planet is unrealistic. You know, we have done so much damage, haven't we? We've ruined it for the animal kingdom. They were here long before we were. You know, we invented plastic. We mined for cobalt. We spew carbon emissions into the air at such a rate that the planet is literally dying. And still people think, you know, oh yeah, okay, well, you know, let's just make more dogs. I don't know. It just confuses me. This is why I also don't really believe in, like, intensive farming of chickens and turkeys, and it's just the wrong thing to do. You know, there's enough of an ecosystem where we can eat the food sustainably and live with nature side by side, but like faking it, that's the reason the planet's burning. Voters signal peril for Democrats on the front of the Wall Street Journal this morning. It says voters are heading to the midterm election year in a sour mood, pessimistic about the economy and short on confidence in the leadership of President Biden and his party on the issues that will concern the most, a new Wall Street Journal poll finds. I mean, this is very interesting to me, and let me tell you why. The economy is in great shape, right? Biden, from what I can see, has done a magnificent job. What has Biden done badly? But the media has been as hard on Biden as they were in their constant coverage of Donald Trump and his antics. The media got re-educated on how to get viewers and readers and listeners. And so they've decided to cover Biden in the way that they covered Trump, and that is very foolish. Because the media unwittingly, and when I say the media, I'm talking about individual journalists who don't really realize the responsibility that they carry. The media has painted Biden as less able because he's older and because he's not very good at speaking publicly. And it is going to do them a disservice because Trump is going to get re-elected in 2024. And then you'll get a true flavor of fascism all over again. And there will be no media because he'll shut it all down. Because he doesn't believe in freedom of the press. So this is what we're dealing with. You know, this very short-sighted view about the loss of democracy in America. So voters signal peril for Democrats on the front of the Wall Street Journal is a very narrow-minded way to go about reporting the state of America right now. When people have got savings because they've had all these pandemic bailouts and they haven't spent it yet, when only 210,000 unemployment claims were made last month, it really is. You know, the country is currently not at war. There was that withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, what do people want? You know, he's having talks with Putin, and Putin's on the back foot. He boycotted Chinese Olympics. I mean, what more do people want? We'll discuss all of these things later in the program, by the way. You have all of this to look forward to. But the poll in the Wall Street Journal really is I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I wonder how many people they surveyed. I hope it was more than 1,000. Stocks rally on variant relief. Hopes that Omicron will have less of an impact on the economy than feared gave stocks another boost yesterday. There you go, you see. Companies plan hefty raises for workers. Companies are planning steeper wage increases next year than at any point since the 2007 recession. according to a new report. You see, another thing that you can thank Joe Biden for. But no, the media will have you think that he's doing a terrible job. At least he's actually doing a job. I mean, the previous guy didn't even work. Amazon unsettles labor markets, wages rise when e-commerce giant comes to town, but so does worker turnover. American Airlines leader in crisis to leave as CEO. It says the AA Group Chief Executive Doug Parker will retire from that job next year after 2 decades running airlines, handing the reins to a longtime lieutenant as the company begins to emerge from the pandemic. Robert Isom, who has served as American's president since 2016, will take over as CEO in March next year, the company said. Mr. Parker will continue to serve as chairman of the company's board. Mr. Parker's career has been bookended by crises. He took the helm at American West Airlines in 2001, just days before the September 11 terrorist attacks. Now he's departing as airlines try to move past the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is he leaving, though? Why doesn't it say why he's leaving? I tell you why, because this is the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal does seek to protect businesses from criticism. That's what it does. Because there is an intrinsic bias in all of these publications. You see what I was saying yesterday about, criticizing people for being racist or, inappropriate in schools and not saying what they'd said? There's no point in running a story and the very crux of the story you leave out. That's not journalism. Biden warns Putin on Ukraine invasion. President tells Russian leader military action will prompt sanctions and stronger responses. Also on the front of the Wall Street Journal. There we go. So that's an Amazon unsettles labor markets. Wages rise when e-commerce giant comes to town. But so does worker turnover. So there we go. That's how the Wall Street Journal is starting today. Jessica, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Pleased to see that your Echo show is working today. And you're, back in business. Happy anniversary. So the Chicago Tribune is next. Or shall I do, Stacey, would you like me to do your San Antonio Express News? Would you prefer me to do that first? Okay, I'll do that first. The San Antonio Express News this morning. Scientists in South Africa bracing for Omicron. Oh, not South Africa. What am I talking about? SA, San Antonio. You see, I'm such an international person that when I see SA, to me, that's South Africa. But of course, this is the San Antonio Express News, so it's more likely to be San Antonio. It's my own name, practically. It says now that the first Texas case of the Omicron coronavirus variant has been found in Harris County. Experts predict it'll soon be detected in San Antonio. Yeah, it's already there, dear. When that happens, scientists here will be the first to find out. When the pandemic struck in early 2020, San Antonio health leaders mostly had to rely on the state health department to search for new variants of the coronavirus. But the UT Health San Antonio laboratory is now doing the work in-house. Deep in the hallways of San Antonio's largest medical school, scientists are using state-of-the-art technology to track the virus. They've seen it mutate into different strains, fueling new waves of infections across the community. Well, I read yesterday that they reckon that the PCR test cannot even pick up Omicron, and that they're going to need an even more detailed test, because PCR, we thought PCR was like the double-down test, and that just having a rapid test was like not a very good test. Well, it turns out that PCR is not even good enough for Omicron. It's constantly changing. The right-wing media will be saying, well, you see, they made it all up before, and they're just moving the goalposts now to make more money. That's what they're doing. The whole thing is a sham and a scam. I just think it's important to point out the various ways in which this story is going to be covered as we cover it. Because, propaganda is the thing that's going to bring this, or has already brought this country down. And it's our job to kind of nip it in the bud. So, yeah, they're basically going to say that the whole reason why people have been, the whole reason why this new Omicron variant has showed up. They actually said on the Fox News show that I was watching the other day, it was Fox and Friends, I think, the morning show. They said that the Democrats had invented Omicron. They said they keep inventing new variants, and they think Fauci is the guy that invents them. They said they're going to keep inventing new variants, and this is the reason why, because it controls the population. They want to control you, they want to vaccinate you, they want to stop you living, and they want to kind of indoctrinate you into the democratic way. Carla, have I told you my theory on why the Democrats do so badly in America? It's because they're called Democrats, and Democrat and democracy are too similar a word. And so when we talk about the fall of democracy, there are Republicans who think that means the fall of the Democrats, and they want it. Do you understand? I honestly think there are people that can't differentiate between democracy and Democrat, Democratic Party and democracy. And so when we reporters, journalists talk about democracy is dying, there will be Republicans, not all of them, but a lot of people that are conservative and vote right-leaning and have extreme views on the right who think that the fall of democracy is going to be good for conservatives. And I've always thought this. And that's the problem when you have a country that is not educated in politics from a very young age. You know, they don't explain what a fragile democracy is, because it's never been fragile in America before. It's always been taken for granted. So why teach it? So this is my theory. You know, the Democrats need to rebrand and not call themselves the Democrats anymore. They need to be called the Truth Party or something. You know? Interesting. So Democrats should call themselves Republican. Yeah. That's a very, very good idea. So what are there other people that have also thought about this? I'm sure there are. This is this has been my view for a while now, that democracy and Democrats is too similar in wording, because fundamentally it does mean the same thing, doesn't it? You know, it's born of the same word. So to be democratic means that you want everybody to have a say, and democracy means the same thing. A democracy is where everybody has a vote, and so. Yeah, it's very different here. You know, the right has become a all-encompassing term to mean everybody, from fiscal conservatives with a small c, moderates, centrists, the far right, the extreme right, nationalists, Nazis. I mean, they're all in that camp now, and it shouldn't be like that. And the thing is, you know, the Democrats are very nuanced with their views. It's really not as cut and dry as that. But the problem is, when you get when there's a civil war, you know, like there is a political civil war now. There is a war. I mean, to say there's no civil war, it's just because then, well, they are using guns to a certain extent, but you know, there is a civil war, isn't there? You know, when people say, oh, we fear a civil war, it's already happening. It's just a civil war of right wing and left wing, of a war of the media and a war of social media and a war of, I mean, you know, you don't go and have dinner with people from the opposing party. It's very rare to have friends who are not of your political persuasion now in America. You might have family members that are, because, family, hopefully, blood is thicker than water. But when we're talking about socializing and having friends and friendship groups, this social civil war has already happened because people have now segregated themselves from people politically, and never the two shall mix, oil and water. But it's now, I'm talking about now, like what is the political landscape now? This is post-Trump. Donald Trump was like a line in the sand for America politically. Because before Trump came along, the far right were not considered to be part of the conservative movement. They were considered to be an extremist view. And, so what Trump did is he basically created a kind of radical, the radical Democrats. That is a phrase that was created basically for the purposes of the media, Okay, let's go back to the newspaper just for a second. Scientists in San Antonio bracing for Omicron, medical school tracking the virus with top technology, as we've discussed. Pearl Harbor vet embraces honor is the headline now. Just one of Area's 3 still alive 80 years after attack attends annual event. That's amazing, isn't it? The retired Air Force technician Sergeant Kenneth Platt was in some ways on his own 80 years ago. As Japanese planes bombed and strafed Pearl Harbor. At the Barn Door restaurant. Who's that? Oh, that's my front door pinging upstairs, That's the guy's fixing the roof. The roof leaked again after I've got a whole new roof, and the guy's outside and he's ringing my doorbell. It just came up on my screen here, and he's like, he wants to talk. And I can't talk, I'm talking to you. He's going to have to wait an hour. It says at the Barn Door restaurant, it seemed he was by himself again, surrounded by his family and friends of other servicemen now deceased who had lived through the attack. The San Antonio area's 2 other known Pearl Harbor survivors didn't make it to the new annual reunion, which once drew quite a few. But Gregarious Platt, he's 100 now. He's 100. He was 20 when it was Pearl Harbor. He made the most of it. He enjoys getting out. I think it's wonderful, he said before the reunion. I just wish there were more of us here to go. Interesting. Just last week, he attended an event at the Petroleum Club that saluted 8 Korean conflict and 14 World War II veterans. In May, he was the guest of honor at his 100th birthday celebration. The other local survivors of the battle that thrust the U.S. into World War II are Heinz Bachmann, 100, and retired Navy Chief Petty Officer Gilbert Mayer, aged 98. How do people live this long? I just don't understand how people live this long. I mean, I've already got aches and pains. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the end of the year. How do people live this long? It's incredible. Nobody in my family lived this long. I mean, I think my grandfather was 90. I think that might be the best we've done. But nobody's lived it. Anything like 100, do me a favour. In England, you get a telegram from the Queen when you hit 100 years. Hand-signed telegram. And there will never be one of those in my family. It's just never going to happen. Catherine has joined us. Hi, Catherine. Thank you for being here. Nice to know you're listening to the show this morning. And if you want a message, then you just can chat to your device. Just say the wake-up word, followed by say, then your message with your Echo Show. Or you can go to backchannel.tv on your web browser, on your phone, on your laptop or whatever, and then you can just chat to me there as well. Easy. Okay, so let's go back to the morning newspapers. We're looking now at this is from Alexandria, Pinville, Louisiana. The Town Talk. Wonderful names of these newspapers. The front lines of the pandemic is the headline. There's a dog. A dog. Charles Wise, paramedic supervisor with American Medical Response in Gulfport, Mississippi, and Tucker, an emotional support dog. Now, he's quite cute, though, this dog. You know? She looks like an ex-girlfriend of mine. This guy keeps ringing the door. We're gonna have to play the US News Update. I'm joking. He doesn't actually look like my ex-girlfriend. It's just he's got this long ears at the side, and she did have huge ears. Let's play the US News Update so I can go and placate the guy who's trying to fix my roof. Give me 2 minutes to go and deal with this, this thing. We're just going to load it up, and then you can listen to that. It's a podcast, incidentally, that I do every day. If you didn't think this was enough news, then there's more news to be had, Oh, Safari doesn't support it. I knew there was going to be a thing. Well, that's fine. That's the downside, isn't it? That you get the advantage of Safari working like a dream. And the downside is that it doesn't support some of these features. Isn't that frustrating? I knew there was going to be a catch. But don't you love how wonderfully the Mac is running now? Can you tell the difference? What a difference. Okay, well, I'll help you with that later. I know a few little tricks that you can do to make that work. But, this is the modern world that we're living in. We're living in a world now where your web browser denotes the kind of person you're going to be that day. It's like, what kind of life are you going to enjoy that day? It's a web browser day. Are you a Chrome person or are you a Safari person? I'm a Safari person, I have to tell you. If you're using a Mac, just stick with Safari. Chrome is just going to slow you down. It's just the way it is, The world has changed. Yeah. You got to have a good internet connection. I paid extra to double my internet speed here. It was only an extra $20 a month, but it doubled my internet speed, and it just made a huge difference. Well, $20 a month in America is not considered a lot of money. I mean, it is in England because we have a huge poverty crisis in England where, $20 is the equivalent of about £16. And I really do feel that we are... the American dollar is very different. Like in Los Angeles here, if you hand out dollar bills as tips, like they're just paper money, Whereas in England, there's no tipping culture. And I was thinking, Carla, could you imagine somebody in England giving like $3 here, $2, like in pounds, like the equivalent? £2, £3, £4, £5, just like handing that out through the day to people that help you out. People don't even know how to accept tips in England. Like if you were to give somebody money, there'd be this whole like hoo-ha. What do I do? Do I take it? The only people I've had success with doing secret tips is doorman at nice hotels when I couldn't find anywhere to park and I ended up wanting to leave my car right outside the door. They were the only people that knew how to accept a tip, Folded up, has to be folded up inside the hand. Whereas here in America, it's just like, boom, there's the money. Because people are working for tips, just a different culture. This is the thing, A few dollars seems to have very little value unless you're collecting a few of those dollars multiple times a day. Anything else on the front of the San Antonio? Oh yeah, let's look at this first responders face growing mental health toll story by Maria Clark on the front of the Town Hall Talk, or the Town Talk from Alexandria, Pinville, Louisiana. The story goes, the ongoing pandemic is driving support to increase access to mental health resources for first responders. Several studies have shown the impact of the pandemic has had on rates of anxiety and depression and substance abuse in the US. But experts say those health concerns are even higher for people who've worked on the front lines of COVID-19 response during the last 2 years. In addition to the pandemic, they dealt with limited personal protective equipment at the onset of the pandemic. There is high job burnout in addition to the social unrest and the scores of natural disasters that have taken place during this time, said Dr. Anna Khoury, DNP RN PHNA BC, Director of Responder Wellness, the First Net program at AT&T. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail in a little while. But what we're basically saying here is that we really focus on the death toll of the pandemic and the infection rate of the pandemic, and we rarely talk about the mental health toll on the people whose job it is to look after people. And, we were talking about the difference between Democrats and Republicans earlier, and here is another example of that, right? Because Republicans, if they don't want to pay their tax and reduce their tax bill, they therefore don't want to pay for first responders. They don't want to pay for people who are in frontline positions. It's very interesting to me. There's a lot of contradiction in the way that American politics has evolved. LA colleges report few sexual assaults. This is between LSU, Southeastern State University, and UL Lafayette, the three biggest public universities in Louisiana with over 68,000 students enrolled between them. Just 12 cases of sexual assault were reported in 2020, but experts and advocates say those numbers don't reflect reality. The vast majority of sexual assaults on Louisiana college and university campuses aren't being reported, sexual assault victim advocates said, due to concerns about not being believed or supported. 1 in 5 women in higher education nationwide experience sexual assault, according to the U.S. Department of Health's Office on Women's Health. So there we go. That's the town talk. I hope that's of use to you. What have we done so far? Chicago Tribune, Wall Street Journal. We've looked at New York Times. We've done the San Antonio Express News. I mean, we're covering a lot of ground here. If this was like a tour guide, you'd be exhausted by now. You'd be like, "Can we have a lunch break, please?" Oh, I'd love a lunch break. Let's go to Arizona, Prescott, Arizona, for the Daily Courier. They lead with, "Have you been the victim of a porch pirate?" Now, I find this subject fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. Because for decades, we've been relying on people not stealing our mail because we hopefully have good neighbors. But the problem is, especially since the pandemic, all of our shopping's being done online. So everything's being delivered. So every day there's a whole stack of packages. It says, if you've been the victim of a so-called porch pirate, someone who steals packages delivered to your residence during the holidays or another time of year, you should know that delivery companies, the Postal Service, and the law have got your back. While FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service follow rules as to where their carriers may place packages at your residence, they're willing to work with your requests provided they are safe. It says you might also be surprised to learn that penalties under federal state law are stiff for stealing packages and under certain circumstances can lead to prison time. With the holiday shopping season underway, it says what follows is a summary of how FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service help their customers avoid package theft, as well as the law's consequences for porch pirates. Interesting. There's a whole list here of things on page 14. It's on page 14 of the Daily Courier. If you're in Arizona, enjoy. Knock yourself out. Good luck to you. I took delivery of something from Belgium a couple of days ago. And it's the first time I've ever used a site called Etsy. Are you aware of this company? They're like eBay's, sister rival. And Okay, well, bless Etsy, but the thing they sent me was not the thing I ordered. This company in Belgium, these people in Belgium. Firstly, it took them ages to send it, because obviously they didn't have it. It was like a throw to go over bed. And it was gold, and they said it was French antique, and it was a bit stained. Anyway, they've mailed it to me, and I opened it, and it's pink. There's nothing gold about it. It's pink. It doesn't look anything like the one in the picture. And I've asked them for a refund. I mean, I don't know. I doubt they'll give it to me because they'll say send it back. And the problem is, sending stuff from Europe to America is very affordable. But sending stuff from America anywhere is very expensive because of capitalism. So, I mean, it's so depressing. It was described as an antique French bedspread, fringed Art Deco, right? I mean, I'm looking at the pictures of it. It's not pink. It's gold. I actually do wish somebody had stolen it. Because I mean, but then again, you know, the United States Postal Service, they delivered it and they stuffed it into the mailbox. They didn't even. I wouldn't mind if they'd left it on the porch. They stuffed it into the tiny mailboxes this big. Maybe that's when it changed from gold to pink. Maybe it got tarnished by the kind of metal frame. It's so annoying. Anyway. FedEx Media Relations Office told the newspaper that there are several steps customers can take to secure their packages during peak delivery season. You can customize home deliveries. You can sign up for a service that tells them, you know, where to hide it. You can, you know, shove it up a pipe. Consider sending the package to your workplace or to a family member, friend, or neighbor who's home during the day. You see, this used to be a huge problem when I lived in London, because in London you don't really have porches. And so there is really a unwritten rule that they don't leave anything. The other thing is if they have to re-deliver it the next day, they get paid again. So invariably they never deliver it the first day, you know? It's like a known scam in the courier industry. Never deliver it the first time. Always leave a card saying we tried to deliver and nobody was in. But just don't even bother trying to deliver it, because you'll get paid again the second time. Carla, how much better is your computer now you're using Safari? It's life-changing, isn't it? She's talking about the stress levels of having a slow internet connection. Yeah. I know. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? You know, this is why... Let me tell you something, just a slight digression. Now, I have many friends who complain, because I'm like the technical guy. You know, everyone's got one. And so people will be like, oh, my internet's terrible. I'm like, well, what kind of internet do you have? And they tell me. And, you know, invariably, the problem is not the service. The service that they're paying for, as in like what's coming into the building, is fine. The problem is how they distribute that around the apartment or the house. So you don't need to change your service. You just need to change the way you're connecting to it. And so the modem or the router that comes with the package that they give you for free, never use that. Never use that thing. Why do you think they give it to you for free? Because it's crap. That's why. So if you're going to spend any money, you can buy a little wireless router that is going to be so much better than the one that came with your internet. And invariably, here in America, I was being charged $5 a month extra for a thing called Wi-Fi service. And it turned out that was the rental of the modem that I wasn't using. And they do that. They don't call it modem rental. They call it Wi-Fi service. Because, and get this, they give you two boxes. They give you a router and a separate modem. So the modem you need to connect to their service, but the router is the Wi-Fi router, and you don't need that if you've got your own. And they charge you for it separately. So I sent it back. And now I'm not paying the extra $5 a month. This is Spectrum, by the way. But all the companies do it. And so it occurred to me that all the people that are complaining of really bad internet at home, it's their own fault. It's their own fault. You know, you have to make it a priority. Make it a priority. We use the internet for everything. I'm using it now to talk to you. We use it for everything. And, you know, the point I'm making is that we are living in an online society now. And if you don't think that spending a few dollars, like $100 or $50 on a decent Wi-Fi system in your house is not a priority for you, then I think you're crazy. It's like, make it the first thing you do. Don't go for months and months complaining that your internet is rubbish and don't do anything about it. Because internet isn't rubbish. Internet is brilliant and it does work. But you have to make the effort. Someone wrote a thing on Nextdoor saying, my internet's so terrible, can anyone advise? I sent a link to a product on Amazon that this person should buy, a new router, because she said she was using an old Apple router from 20 years ago. And she wrote to me and she's like, changed my life. And then this is what will happen to you. Once you do change over, you'll forget how bad it was very quickly. You'll forget what you put up with very quickly. You'll be so used to this new level of productivity that you won't even notice that you literally sat for ages trying to get things to connect. And so that's what I did. I just invested and I spent a bit of money. It wasn't much. For $20 or $30 or $40 or $50, you can get something that is 1,000,000 times better than the free thing that comes. And the other thing is, never use boosters around the house. Never use boosters. They don't work. You need a thing called a mesh system. That's the new thing. It's a 3-channel mesh system. Just trust me. Spend the money. Get it working great. It'll change your life. You'll get more done. You'll get more done. You know, you haven't spent the money on going on vacation, so just spend it on getting your internet better. Let's go to Florida now in the Tampa Bay Times. UF researchers felt pressure to destroy data on COVID-19. This is a faculty Senate panel alleges more violations of academic freedom, says staff was warned not to contradict the state on pandemic issues. This is a good story. Fear of upsetting state officials, talking about Ron DeSantis, the conservative state of Florida. Fear of upsetting state officials is pervasive amongst faculty at the University of Florida, to the point that race-related references have been edited out of course materials, and researchers felt pressure to destroy COVID-19 data, according to a report released Monday by a faculty Senate committee. The 6-person panel was convened 3 weeks ago to investigate academic freedom issues after the university decided to bar 3 political science professors from testifying in a lawsuit against the state. But its findings go well beyond that. They were so disturbing, especially regarding COVID-19 research, that the group decided to speed up its work, said Diana Wright, a constitutional law professor and former faculty Senate chairperson who served on the committee. She said, "We knew it was right. It was much more widespread," Wright said in an interview. "We knew there was more silencing and pressure coming from above. The big above." Yeah, the big above. Ron DeSantis. You big man. It says the committee received a flood of input from faculty, from stories about attempts to serve as expert witnesses to instances that dealt with race and COVID-19 research across disciplines. The report discusses several challenges faced by UF researchers who are working on COVID-19 with an unidentified state entity. It describes external pressure to destroy data, as well as barriers to accessing, analyzing, and publishing the numbers. Taken together, the report said those problems inhibited the ability of faculty to contribute scientific findings during a worldwide pandemic. Wow. I mean, This is the world that we're living in now, isn't it? You know? This is the world that we're living in, where you are prevented from getting access to information. And it blows my tiny mind. It really does. Blows my tiny mind. I honestly feel like we're living in a whole new dystopian universe. You know? I'm tweeting this story because I just feel like it's essential. Yeah. This is insane. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. I've just sent it to my people. I've sent it to my people. Oh, the landlord's messaged me. Let me just send him a text. I mean, I can't believe I'm having to do this. There we go. I've sent the text. I've sent the tweet. I've done all my housekeeping work. But this from the Tampa Bay Times is one of those stories where you're just like, how? Like, how? St. Petersburg's Jordan Park to undergo $93 million redevelopment, also on the front of the Tampa Bay Times. Also, Florida sees first Omicron cases. The newest variant makes its inevitable appearance in patients in St. Lucie, Hillsborough counties. And also how Tampa Bay residents quit their jobs. The pandemic has led many workers to reassess their careers. Interesting. Florida. Didn't I say yesterday that, you know, the Republicans living in California are all moving to Florida? And all the Floridians, the Democratic Floridians, are all moving to California. Stacey has to go and have a bath. She says she has excellent internet in her house. Well, I'm so pleased. You know, we deserve it. We deserve excellent internet because we live on the internet. I must have... Harper, hello, thank you for calling. Well, thank you for being on the program. Are you in England, Harper? That's great. You see, my friends in England, including Carla, who's producing the show, think that 10 megabits a second is a decent download speed. They think that's normal. I'm not even on fiber, and I get 500 megabits a second down. That's just normal. 500 down. I get 25 up. But my friends in England, they're like, oh yeah, I get 10 down, and I get 1 up. And I'm like, what can you do with that? Like, that was fine, like in the early 2000s. But the thing that people don't understand is that, you know, the internet is actually more data hungry now. You know, in order to get websites to load fast and look great and do Zoom and FaceTime and all of these things, you gotta have like 10 up minimum, ideally 20. And all of these internet service providers that advertise their download speeds are wasting their time. They should be advertising their upload speeds. To me, it's all about the upload speed. I want to send a picture of me to you. I don't care what you look like. I want to make sure I look good. But they never advertise their upload speeds because they're crap. That's why. They're like a 10th or a 20th of the download speed. Crazy. So listen, I feel like, you know, we do need to really talk seriously about the internet and know that it's important to invest in good internet. You don't need to go to the gym anymore. You know, you can do that at home on YouTube if you have a decent internet connection. You can exercise with anybody. I just joined Apple Fitness. Ask me how it's going. Been doing it a week. Haven't done it once. So listen, I think we're pretty much done on the morning papers. We've just got one from Illinois to do. Should we do that one? Okay. Well, let's look at this story from Illinois. It's the Southern. Tornado damages businesses and homes. This is an EF1 rated twister, tore through the city in just 7 minutes. Wow. Judges ask questions in redistricting lawsuits. We're going to talk about redistricting in just a few minutes. It says oral arguments began on Tuesday in 3 lawsuits challenging the new legislative district maps that lawmakers passed earlier this year, with 3 federal judges asking detailed questions of all the parties in the cases. Let's look at this story about Min King Chow, I think his name is. He was indicted under the former President Donald Trump's China initiative for allegedly fraudulently obtaining $151,000 in federal grant money from the National Science Foundation. He's alleged to have concealed support he was receiving from the Chinese government in a Chinese university, according to allegations outlined by the U.S. Department of Justice. So let's unpick this, because, on the face of it, with this natural xenophobia that seems to be built into everybody living in the West, there's always more to the story than you realize. So the China Initiative was created during the Donald Trump administration, and Professor Chow is a 30-year resident of the U.S., right? He obtained U.S. citizenship in 2006. And for the last 21 years, he's been teaching mathematics. Yet, is under investigation because of a Trump xenophobic initiative that all Chinese people must be spies. That's basically the Trump initiative. If you look a little bit Chinese, you probably brought the virus over from China. And if you look a lot Chinese and you've got a Chinese name, then you are definitely a spy. This is the Donald Trump initiative. I mean, they claim it reflects the strategic priority of countering Chinese national security threats and reinforces the former president's overall national security strategy. The initiative was launched against the background of previous findings by the administration concerning China's practices. I mean, this is just so offensive in so many ways, isn't it? Let me just read you a little bit more about this story, because it's almost like it's only getting coverage in the Southern, right, in Illinois. It says Cara Benyas said she first met Professor Min King Chow when their daughters were both in the toddler room at the Child Development Lab at SIU. With our first ever conversation, I remember being struck by how friendly he was, how he interacted so lovingly with his daughter. I would see Ming every day at drop-off and pick-up. We eventually became very close friends, and our daughters are still best friends to this day, said Benyas, a music teacher. Chiao was indicted under former President Donald Trump's China initiative for allegedly fraudulently obtaining $151,000 in federal grant money from the National Science Foundation by concealing support he was receiving from the Chinese government and a Chinese university, according to allegations. In November, the DOJ brought forth a superseding indictment accusing him of wire fraud, tax fraud, and failure to report a foreign bank account. That's in addition to the previous indictments by a grand jury in April on 2 counts of wire fraud and something else. Please see page 5. And I mean, this is just pure xenophobia. I mean, there isn't really much else to it. Do you see what I mean? You see what I'm saying here? So we're kind of living in this parallel universe now, aren't we? Where we basically have, if you're white and American born, you're kind of It's pretty safe. No one's going to ask any questions of you, despite the fact that most of the crime is committed by white American-born people. Most of the domestic terrorism is committed by white American-born people. Most of the fraud is committed by white American-born people. That's just... that's the statistics. And yet we tend to focus on these minority groups and fear what it is they have to say or what it is that they are presenting. And this is only because of people like Donald Trump who have now kind of set a precedent for this new thinking that these people are not to be trusted. The university initiated the investigation based on the China Initiative after the SIUC administration found out Professor Chow was facing indictment by the Department of Justice. The self-proclaimed China Initiative was created during the Trump administration. It creates a reprehensible and frightening situation in a country that is supposed to honor the rule of law and presumption of innocence. It says, we believe the federal charges against Professor Chow should be dismissed, and further, the university should continue the disciplinary investigation against Professor Chow and discontinue, and restore him to teaching and research duties. He's a 30-year resident of the United States. He obtained his U.S. citizenship in 2006. He's been teaching mathematics for 21 years. And yet, on April the 21st, he got a notion that the U.S. Department of Justice provided him with the indictment and claimed that he was concealing support from the Chinese government in a grant application to the National Science Foundation. Oh, Daniel, thank you for joining us. We've got Harper, we've got Daniel, we've got Catherine, we've got Jessica, we've got Tegan, James, Stacey had to go, Bob's still here, hopefully. I'm very pleased you're hanging out with us this morning here on Backchannel. If you want to get in touch, you know how to chat. You just wake up your Alexa device, then say your message. And if you've got a web browser open, hopefully Safari rather than Chrome on a Mac, you will be able to just type in backchannel.tv and you can message me that way as well. I mean, this is just insane to me that Trump had this whole initiative, this xenophobic initiative. And you can imagine him inventing it, thinking of it, and telling the Department of Justice, which is supposed to be a separate entity, that this is what he wants to achieve, is to fish out anybody who might not be wholly, solely, truthfully American. Fletcher publicly urged to stop the investigation and to end the whole China Initiative. It says, we urge faculty, students, and the general public to familiarize themselves with the issues at stake when freedom to research is constricted with ethnicity as a main focal point by reading and signing onto the Stanford Letter, which is signed by faculty from across the country and urges the DOJ to end the China Initiative. I mean, it blows my mind. Just blows my mind. The tunes today are very good. This is from a whole new category of tunes, isn't it? What a wonderful soundtrack we have today. Just turn it up a little bit. Oh, yes, this is popping. I mean, this guy, this guy, this is insane. This article is actually from my birthday on the 16th of November. Do you remember we celebrated my birthday on the air? I can't believe that was like more than 2 weeks ago. Time just goes so fast. I can't believe it. Selective electrodeposition has been used to recover cobalt and nickel from commercially available lithium nickel manganese cobalt, or NMC, oxide battery electrodes. The method, developed by a team led by University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign chemical and biomolecular engineer Professor Chow, is set to produce the final product of purities of approximately 96.4% and 94.1%, for cobalt and nickel respectively. I mean, this basically means you can recycle even non-recyclable batteries. Published in Nature Communications, the new method could make spent batteries a highly sustainable secondary source of the two metals. According to Sue, cobalt and nickel have similar electrochemical properties or standard reduction potentials, making it challenging for chemists to recover pure forms of each metal from battery electrodes. It says, or they say, there are a variety of methods available for the recovery of cobalt and nickel from battery electrodes, but they have drawbacks. Most require energy-intensive high-temperature processes or strong solvents that present disposal challenges. The industry demands methods that will not cause additional problems like high energy consumption or toxic waste. So they've basically worked out how to do this. The development of a tunable liquid electrolyte and polymer coating on the electrodes. Why didn't I think of that? And yet, if Donald Trump was still the president, they would have deported this guy by now, and he would have taken all of this knowledge with him back to China. I don't know. I really feel like here's the greatest controversy with this entire debate about immigration. America is a country of immigrants, discovered by immigrants, born of immigrants, not for a second taking away the story of the Native Americans. Please be clear about that. But modern America is a country of immigrants. And yet, and you know, George Washington was a conservative, right? The first president. And so you now have this conservative movement that wants to ban immigrants from a country of immigrants. And I wouldn't mind, but you know, Donald Trump proudly talks about being Scottish. Well, that's not American. Actually, was it debunked that he was Scottish? His father was he claimed his father was born in Scotland, but his father was born on like the Lower East Side or something. There's a lot of controversy. Maybe he says his mother was Scottish. I don't know. Anyway, my point is, and there is a point to this, trust me, that, you know, Joe Biden is Irish. He's from Ballina, where my friend Michaela is from. But he was born in America. But to him, his parents and his ancestors are Irish. They say Irish American. They say African American. We say Italian American. It doesn't mean you were born in Italy. It means that your heritage is Italian. My friend Dean is Italian American. He just got his dual citizenship. And I really believe that, you know, we ignore our past. You know, there are schools trying to ban the teaching of slavery and the history of slavery, and yet there is this obsession with, you know, America first. But it's all built on a lie. Because some of the greatest works and the greatest discoveries and the greatest mathematics and engineering that is going on here, for example, in a university in Illinois, is coming from immigrants, economic migrants, asylum-seeking migrants, or people like me who came to America because we just thought it would be fun. And so this criticism of Ilhan Omar and saying that she's a suicide bomber, or criticizing even lawmakers criticizing lawmakers because they're not the same color. I mean, it's just basic racism. Anyway, I'll leave that story with you. I might have to cover that story elsewhere. I do think it's very interesting. Very interesting. Let's take a little look over here. Oh, look, I just zoomed in for a second. I want to switch my autofocus on. There we go. Now I'm focused automatically. I don't know why I wanted to do that. I just did. Making a few little adjustments here. You can probably see. There we go. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great story. When I say a great story, I hate to do that because that almost makes it sound like it's, but this is how journalists sort of say that's a great story, which means it's actually a tragic story. That's the tragedy of journalism, is that, your business is to expose very tragic and serious stories. But to journalists, it's a great story because there's meat on the bone. It's like there's a story to tell. There's so many news articles that don't really say anything these days. Todd, thank you for joining us. Todd's in Arizona. Harper is with us. Harper. Daniel is with us as well. Thank you, Daniel. Nice to know you're tuning in, listening in, part of Backchannel. If you want to chat, go to backchannel.tv on your web browser, or you can message your Amazon device. If you've got an Echo Show, just wake it up, then say, and then your message. And incidentally, Backchannel has a whole bunch of hosts doing a whole bunch of shows. It's not just me. Haley and Allison live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs, and their one-star cinema review. I'm actually doing this from memory now. I don't even need to read this anymore. Or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick, whose program Your Pal Hal directly follows this show in half an hour, here on Backchannel. And Hal's mum, Deborah, will probably be logging in shortly on YouTube, as she often does, to just check that we're saying nice things about her boy, which is always the case. So you can watch on YouTube as well. There's a live stream there, and you can message there in the comment section. Okay, let's go back to the running order, because there's a lot to talk about. We were going to talk about first responders and their mental health toll. We mentioned this earlier in the Talktown newspaper from Louisiana. Essential workers, including healthcare workers, are expected to go out when everyone else is expected to stay inside. So I want to know if you know someone who is a first responder. Maybe it's a job you do yourself. Do they talk about their work and what they've seen and gone through? How do they deal with patients passing away? I watched on the news on TV yesterday a healthcare worker having to phone a family to say that they couldn't resuscitate him. And, you heard the screams coming from down the phone of the family, just like in the devastation of hearing that news. But the tragedy is this person wasn't vaccinated. And I still struggle to kind of get my head around this. Why is it a surprise? For 2 years we've been talking about this pandemic being deadly. Deadly not just to you in the public arena, but deadly to first responders. And yet they reckon that 20% of first responders won't get vaccinated? So what's made people so nervous and anxious about it? How can you feel more anxious about the vaccine than you can about the disease? It just doesn't make any sense to me. The disease is the thing that we fear, not the vaccine. The vaccine wears off. It's temporary. What are you worried about? The needle? You worried about the pain in the arm? You worried about feeling a bit rough for 24 hours? What's the big deal? You tried coronavirus? I don't recommend that. And now we're looking at first responders who are facing burnout. They are suffering themselves from trauma, from post-traumatic stress disorder. The guilt of compassion fatigue or empathy burnout. These are all things. And what about those who work in healthcare or hospitals that are not a doctor or a nurse? The people that work in transportation or logistics or just being a porter, just moving beds around and having to deal with this. Especially cleaners, because cleaners are, of course, the ones that are faced with having to decontaminate coronavirus. They're the most likely to come face to face with it. And because of the way our social structure is, there are more Black and Latino people cleaning in America, and therefore those people are also more likely to get coronavirus. And those people are more likely to not get vaccinated because of the historical problems that we've had in America, where white people have tested vaccines on black people. So this self-fulfilling prophecy is like born of the country's own ills. Vaccine hesitancy in white people from the right is coming from misinformation and from propaganda on right-wing media. And then you have ethnic minority groups who are hesitant to get vaccinated because either they can't afford to take time off work to go and get vaccinated and they don't have the confidence to speak up to their bosses and say, I need time off to go and get vaccinated, or they are doing frontline worker jobs and they just, it's not a priority for them. I mean, I went with a friend to go and look at buying a new car. And the woman who worked there, she was Latino, and we were talking, and I said, have you been vaccinated? Because we all got in the car together for a test drive. And I said, have you been vaccinated? And she's like, no, I haven't had time. And I was like, wow. She works as a salesperson in the car dealership, and she hasn't had time because she has a family, and she works in the car dealership, and she probably has to drive a long way to get to the dealership. Because invariably dealerships are in more expensive areas, and the people who work in them live in poorer areas. And so she hasn't had time. And I tried to explain to her why it was a priority, and to her it just was not a priority to get vaccinated. I could not explain to her. So, this is the world that we're living in now. It's so complex, it's so nuanced. There's so many different types of people with different needs and wants and desires. And we can only really put out the truth and hope that people will hear it. But, if you are watching certain news channels, then you're going to hear a different version of reality. And so you'll think that that's the truth, and then you'll stick with that truth. So we're just looking at, healthcare workers this morning and asking you if you yourself are somebody that is a healthcare worker, if you're concerned about your mental health. There's actually a very good website called mental health, mhanational.org/frontline. It says throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Mental Health America has witnessed increasing numbers of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and other mental health concerns. COVID-19 has had a profound negative effect on the mental health of the nation, especially among those who are faced with combating the virus. And while many throughout the US are coping with the fear and uncertainty of COVID-19 from their homes, essential workers, including healthcare workers, must expose themselves to the virus every day. Healthcare workers are also experiencing conditions that have been compared to a war zone, continually witnessing the direct effects of the pandemic as it spreads throughout communities. So this organization says it's essential we provide resources to help healthcare workers cope with the mental health impact of their work. So that's just one of these organizations. There are many offering support and help. Forbes did an article, when was it? A little while ago. And they basically suggested 4 ways that healthcare leaders can protect the mental health of frontline workers. I mean, imagine being forced to go in, day out, to the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, do you remember those images that we saw in the early days of New York, where they had morgues built in temporary tents outside the hospitals because there was no room in the mortuary to actually put all of these bodies, people that were dying. They didn't know how to treat COVID-19. They didn't know what it was. So they were treating it like pneumonia. And that was not helping people get better. The pressure put on healthcare workers after COVID-19 is leading to record levels of burnout across the industry. In a recent survey by Berksey, an insurance division of Berkshire Hathaway, an alarming 84% of healthcare worker respondents have reported signs of burnout. Alcohol use is up too, especially among older workers. A statistic cited in a survey of doctors by Medscape showed 30% of baby boomer respondents had more than 5 drinks per week, up from 21% in 2019. I mean, it makes me... I don't know, I'm trying to get my head around this. I'm taking my headphones off just for a little bit of freedom of the ears for a second. But I can still, hear you and everybody else. You're right here. I've seen the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare workers firsthand as a psychologist on the front lines of the pandemic, and the statistics match the exhaustion and anxiety I've seen day to day. This is the wording on this survey. It says, unfortunately, the pandemic has only exacerbated an existing problem in healthcare. Long before COVID-19, healthcare professionals were more likely than the general population to experience mental health issues. Sleep deprivation and burnout. As the world slowly returns to normal, many doctors, nurses, clinicians, and therapists still have a long road toward their own recovery. So here are 4 ways that leaders in the healthcare industry can build healthier environments that protect the mental health of their frontline workers. The first is, they claim, is to educate employees about stress management. We were talking about that earlier, about like getting a better quality, faster internet connection at home, just to reduce your stress levels. It's a good start. Make mental health a team effort. They say building a supportive culture that prioritizes mental health can help you more easily identify those who are struggling. Create a stigma-free environment. It says healthcare professionals often reuse mental health services for the same reason that many other people do. And some feel they don't have time. Others feel they can manage on their own. And some fear for the stigma related to seeking help for mental health issues, mistakenly believing they may lose their credibility or even their license. To put resources within reach is the final one of these. Fortunately, many workplaces have started to recognize the need for on-site mental health service. Some large hospitals have added wellness respite rooms. I mean, years ago when I worked in the hospitals, they used to have a non-denominational sanctuary, which was basically a multi-faith church space. You would always find burned out nurses sitting in there, just like getting their hell out off the wards. It was rarely used for prayer, it was mainly used for respite and meditation. And so, you learn firsthand that actually people are constantly putting on a brave face in the workplace, constantly pushing their bodies and their minds to just hold on to it, gotta do this, because that's the difference between just a job and a vocation. And invariably in jobs like nursing, it is seen as a calling because nurses are not paid enough. I mean, they're paid relatively well in America. In England, they're barely paid at all, to be honest. Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining us. Todd, nice to know you're here. Harper, Danielle, all good people on the chat today. But what I'm saying is that why is it the most important people in society get paid the least? Why are the most important people in society the ones who have to take the greatest risks? Why are the most important people in society marginalized or criticized for being spies of China, as is the case in this story earlier that we were discussing? Professor Chow, the 30-year resident of the United States who's had citizenship since 2006, has been teaching maths for 21 years, and yet is under investigation because of a Trump initiative. Because he's Chinese, therefore he must be a spy. Do me a favor. It's beggars belief. Anyway, this is I don't know if we're going to have time for redistricting today. We might have to do it tomorrow. I mean, it'll still be a story tomorrow because we also want to talk about Dwight Eisenhower. And I think maybe we should just do Dwight Eisenhower just to cheer ourselves up in the final 15 minutes of the show. Lol. On this day in American history, 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower gave his Atoms of Peace speech, which is, in England, the equivalent, we had the Rivers of Blood speech, didn't we? That's what we had in England, the Rivers of Blood speech. That was not a good speech. That was during the kind of civil rights movement. Or actually, the civil rights movement came immediately after that speech because it was such a shocking speech. Atoms of Peace, though, was a propaganda component of the Cold War strategy of containment. Eisenhower's speech opened a media campaign that would last for years and that aimed at emotion management, balancing fears of continuing nuclear armament with promises of peaceful use of uranium in future nuclear reactors. And it's very interesting. So would you like me to read like a little bit of the speech just so you can hear, like, I'll just read you what he said. I might like forward on to a bit that's a bit more appropriate. He said, "The great tests and the great accomplishments still lie ahead, and in the confident expectation of those accomplishments, I would use the office which for the time being I hold." See, that's nice, isn't it? Eisenhower recognized that he was a temporary president, whereas Trump said, I want to be president forever. It's like a recognition of the fact that he was just holding the office briefly. And the office is ultimately the important factor, not the person who sits in it. He says, "To assure you the government of the United States will remain steadfast in support of this body. This we shall do in the conviction that you will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, of the faith which can bring you to this world, lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men." He says, "Clearly it would not be fitting for me to take this occasion to present you to a unilateral American report on Bermuda. Nevertheless, I assure you that in our deliberations on that lovely island, we sought to invoke those same great concepts of universal peace and human dignity, which are so clearly etched in your charter." Meaning the Constitution, I presume. "Neither would it be a measure of this great opportunity to recite, however, hopefully, pious platitudes. I therefore decided that this occasion warranted my saying to you of the things that have been on the minds and hearts of my legislative and executive associates and on mine for a great many months, thoughts I had originally planned to say primarily to the American people. He says, "I know that the American people share my deep belief that if a danger exists in the world, it is a danger shared by all, and equally, that if hope exists in the minds of one nation, that hope should be shared by all. Finally, if there is to be advanced any proposal designed to ease, even by the smallest measure, the tensions of today's world, what more appropriate audience could there be than the members of the General Assembly of the United Nations?" He says, "I feel impelled to speak today in a language that, in a sense, is new, one which I, who've spent much of my life in the military profession, would have preferred never to use. That new language is the language of atomic warfare. The atomic age has moved forward at such a pace that every citizen of the world should have some comprehension, at least in comparative terms, of the extent of this development, of the utmost significance to every one of us. Clearly, the people of the world are to conduct an intelligent search for peace. They must be armed with the significant facts of today's existence." I do feel that Eisenhower was kind of onto something. Do you know what I mean? Imagine being the one that has to really, explain to the American people what nuclear proliferation is all about. He spoke before the UN General Assembly, pledging the US's determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma, to devote its entire heart and mind to find the way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man shall not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life. Well, 60 years have now elapsed since the so-called Atoms for Peace speech. Its implementing program gave birth to the global nuclear industry and precipitated remarkable progress in the use of nuclear technology to improve public health and human development. Today, 30 countries and Taiwan have a total of 438 operational nuclear power reactors and more than 246 operational research reactors. 10,000 hospitals worldwide use medical isotopes, including as part of 28 million medical procedures every year in the United States and Europe alone, according to the World Nuclear Association. Yeah, did you know that? You go into any hospital and there is a nuclear department. It's called nuclear medicine. Who knew that they have nuclear medicine? Who knew? Peaceful nuclear applications include eradication of disease-causing insects, such as a certain, fly, like a parasite, and the production of radiation-induced cultivars for improved food crop yields in the developing world. But anybody who has cancer knows that they're being exposed to radiation when they have radiation therapy. This is the whole issue, isn't it? That nuclear in hospitals now is normal. And nuclear is actually very environmentally friendly in terms of the emissions, but it's not environmentally friendly when it comes to the disposal of the waste. There is a byproduct to a nuclear reaction, and so what do you do with that? Invariably, it just goes to landfill. They bury it somewhere in this nuclear wasteland. That's right, yes. In the Sellafield nuclear plant in the west of England, it kind of blew across the Irish Sea and caused the Irish to get cancer because of this. And Bono's wife was a campaigner against this. He wrote 3 albums about it. He didn't really, but they could have been. So Atoms for Peace, just talking about this Eisenhower speech, it provided the ideological foundation for the creation of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Now, the downside, yes, there's nuclear medicine, and we've talked about that, radiation therapy and everything. But there is a downside because, apparently that speech provided political cover for the biggest nuclear arms buildup in US history, and it helped fuel the Cold War arms race. 125,000 nuclear warheads were produced between 1945 and 2013, and more than 10,000 of these, they currently remain in the arsenals of the 9 nuclear weapon-possessing countries. I can't imagine what it must be like to be in charge of nuclear missiles, missiles that could end humanity. Donald Trump was in charge of those missiles for 4 years. Not for the last 6 weeks, apparently, after he lost the election. He didn't even bother going into the White House. He just went off to play golf and didn't read a single security briefing. If anybody, Russia or China or anybody, wanted to invade America, the best time would have been the last 6 weeks of the Trump presidency, because nobody was president, apparently. Mike, Harper, Todd, Danielle, thank you for joining us and being part of the show. It's been a pleasure. I'm Anthony Davis. Your pal Hal is on the way next. He'll be palling it and halling it and spending his morning with you. You got him for a couple more hours here on Backchannel. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's noon Eastern. Have yourselves a wonderful Wednesday. It's the 8th of December. Make the most of it because it's nearly Christmas. And bye for now. See you tomorrow.